Welcome, everyone. You're watching Inside the Americas. Coming up in today's show, Brazil's other election, as Bolsonaro and Lula hit the campaign trail for round 2 of the presidential vote. We'll look at the big winners in the parliamentary election that could make things difficult if left-leaning Lula defeats the incumbent. Then Haiti reports its first deaths from cholera in 3 years. Fears growing now that they could prompt a repeat of the country's outbreak 12 years ago that left some 10,000 dead. And the report that's shaken U.S. women's soccer to the core. A new investigation into last season's scandal says emotional abuse and sexual misconduct were systemic, impacting multiple teams, coaches, and players. I'm Jeannie Godula. Brazil's presidential election is now looking at a runoff between the current leader, Jair Bolsonaro, and former president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The current president did much better than expected, keeping former left-leaning Lula from his predicted first-round win. And if Lula does make it past the post in the second round, he'll have one big challenge in store, a very right-leaning parliament. Catherine Viette takes a look.
It was a big night for politicians supported by Jair Bolsonaro. On October 2nd, 8 former ministers of the far-right president were elected to Congress, including Eduardo Pazuello, his former health minister, who oversaw Brazil's COVID response, which claimed 680,000 lives. Former Agriculture Minister Tereza Cristina, a staunch defender of the use of pesticides, also won. And Ricardo Salles, the former environment minister, who oversaw skyrocketing deforestation in the Amazon and was forced to resign after being accused of illegal timber trafficking. A clear victory for the far right, highlighting the enduring strength of Bolsonaro's conservative movement. His Liberal Party won the majority of seats in the Senate, 14 out of 27 up for grabs, putting it ahead of Lula's Workers' Party, which only won 8 seats. But the biggest gains came in Congress, with the Liberal Party winning 99 seats. Right-leaning parties allied with Bolsonaro now control half the chamber. The results have breathed new life into Bolsonaro's presidential bid. He came in second in the first round of voting after Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, but the gap was much smaller than predicted. Lula is now facing a more competitive runoff. Should he win on October 30th, he'll be dealing with a more conservative Congress, making it tougher to get legislation passed.
Next, to a grim reprise for one of the world's poorest and most unstable countries. This week, Haiti recorded its first 7 deaths from cholera in 3 years. The new outbreak comes as mass protests against gas price hikes have even further reduced medical access to many areas of the nation. It's now threatening a repeat of Haiti's devastating cholera outbreak 12 years ago when some 10,000 people were killed. Brian Quinn explains.
On the streets of Port-au-Prince, garbage piled along sidewalks. Residents forced to seek potable water in portable containers. On Sunday, Haitian officials confirmed that at least 7 people are known to have died of cholera in recent days.
One death that happened over the course of the day, unfortunately, was a person who died in the community. This is a problem. When there are people who have diarrhea, vomiting, and have no way to get the person to the health center where they could survive.
Lack of access to safe drinking water is just the latest of Haiti's many problems. Widespread gang violence and a hike in fuel prices have brought thousands into the streets demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Roadblocks erected by protesters are now adding to the difficulties faced by medical teams, unable to access areas where cholera-stricken patients are located, a phenomenon denounced by the United Nations on Monday.
In the current context of social unrest and insecurity, it is imperative that these teams be guaranteed safe access to at-risk areas, including where cases have been confirmed or suspected, to help mitigate the risk of a large or disruptive outbreak of the disease.
The United Nations itself has a troubled history in the country. UN peacekeepers assigned to Haiti in the wake of its devastating earthquake in 2010 were behind a cholera outbreak that killed 10,000 and sickened some 800,000, a responsibility the organization did not officially recognize until 2016.
Last year, half of the coaches of America's National Women's Soccer League were fired following players' complaints of emotional and sexual abuse. This week, a follow-up investigation into that scandal showed that that kind of abuse is systemic in women's football in the U.S. And to break it all down for us, I'm joined on the set now by France 24's Selena Sykes from our sports desk. Hi, Selena.
Hi, Jeannie.
Before we get into these findings and all of what the report actually has to say, talk to us about the magnitude of this scandal, because women's soccer is huge in the United States.
That's right. And the findings of this year-long investigation have really shaken the women's soccer game in the US to its core, as you said. And at a time when women's football everywhere is seeing a big shift, not just in the US, also internationally. And if we look just at how big the game is in the US, it still strides ahead of Europe, for instance. And this really highlights the sheer magnitude of the findings in this report. We currently have 12 teams in the National Women's Soccer League, and with each around 20 first-team players in the squad, as well as backroom staff and management. And there are plans to expand this to 14 teams in the 2024 season. And of course, there are also reserve players, teams in lower divisions, and of course, youth teams. And if we look at, say, last year when these allegations first came to light, within a few weeks, half of the coaches in the NWSL, 10 teams back then at the time, were linked to these accusations. A really shocking figure, which just highlights one of the main findings of this report, just how systemic all of this really is.
And I think that's really the most stunning thing in all of this, is just how widespread these incidents were and the lack of action.
That's absolutely right. So this report focused on the allegations against 3 coaches in particular over several years. And there have really been some shocking accounts from players about the sexual misconduct and the emotional abuse they suffered. But what really hits home, as you said, is just how meticulously this investigation details how powerful officials in the game were told about the abuse, and they either did very little to investigate it or stop it. We can listen to a player, Becky Sauerbrunn, who plays for the Portland Thorns in the top flight league in the US, and she's also the captain of the national side. And she says that management has really failed to put these safeguards in place for players.
We're angry that it took over 200 people sharing their trauma to get to this point right now, to repeatedly ask people in authority to take their abuse and their concerns seriously. And I think for so long, this has always fallen on the player to demand change. And that is because the people in authority and decision-making positions have repeatedly failed to protect us.
So as you heard there, Jeannie, so many failings by owners and other big people in the game that have allowed this really vicious cycle of abuse to go unpunished for so long. And 3 clubs even refuse to cooperate with investigators. And this really has been seen time and time again. The coach is found to be abusive, but their misconduct has been minimized or even swept under the rug. There have been several examples of these coaches who were let go by teams because of this, but the public narrative said that the club had just not renewed their contracts. So these coaches were hired repeatedly and moved from team to team.
So the crucial thing, obviously, is to change this behavior. What measures has the report suggested should take place?
So we've seen a long list of recommendations, including a public list of individuals who've been suspended or barred by the US Soccer Federation, more vigorous vetting of coaches before they get given licenses, making investigations into these accusations compulsory, and setting clear rules about what acceptable behaviour is and conduct, and also perhaps hiring player safety officers. And there's also been calls from several players themselves to get rid of these owners and officials within the system that failed to protect these players. And this might also have a bigger impact elsewhere. We obviously know in the women's game, the US team is really the shining example that so many teams look to aspire to. And we've already seen this with them getting equal pay and other teams wanting to do the same. So this report we see may well have a wider impact outside of the US.
Selena, thank you so much for looking into that. Selena Sykes there on that bombshell report on systemic sexual abuse and misconduct in U.S. women's soccer. All right, we'll wrap up now with our number of the week, $44 billion. That is the dollar amount Elon Musk now says he will pay to buy Twitter after all. The world's richest man has spent the past 3 months trying to get out of that deal, saying he'd been misled by the company's board on the number of fake users and bots on the site. And with a lawsuit over Musk's attempted withdrawal, a battle most analysts say he would lose, set to begin 2 weeks from now, the Tesla founder does look ready to sign. Brian Quinn reports.
One of the biggest corporate lawsuits in decades averted for now, as Elon Musk says he will indeed buy Twitter, avoiding a protracted courtroom battle he was likely to lose.
For Twitter's board, it's a huge victory. And I think for Musk, it was a scapegoat situation, got cold feet, but ultimately legally couldn't get out of it. And I think started to recognize that.
After quietly amassing a 9% stake, in April, Musk revealed his offer to take Twitter private for $54.20 per share, saying the company wasn't meeting its potential as a platform for free speech. In July, though, he announced that the deal was off due to what he called Twitter's misrepresentation of the number of fake accounts and spam bots among its users. Twitter sued to make him honor the deal, with Musk himself due to be deposed later this week. Many analysts believed his true hesitation was due to a major slump in tech stocks, including the Tesla shares that are funding Musk's part of the $44 billion purchase price. The world's richest man has already lined up some $7 billion from private investors and $12.5 billion in leveraged debt from banking partners. With $4 billion worth of shares already in his portfolio, he's still on the hook for more than $20 billion to close the deal. After filing a letter of intent with U.S. regulators, Musk tweeted that the acquisition will be an accelerant to creating X, the everything app. And though the trial is now adjourned, Twitter isn't dropping its lawsuit, wary that Musk's latest move could be a stalling tactic as he looks for another way out of the deal.
That wraps it up for this Inside the Americas. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time for all the news from north to south.